Welcome to the Four Worlds podcast from Tomorrow's World Today. We're diving into the latest in tech, science, and sustainability, from nature's mysteries in the world of inspiration to the hands-on crafts of creation, the bold breakthroughs of innovation, and the scaled-up wonders of production. This is your ticket to the stories shaping tomorrow. Welcome to another episode of the Four Worlds podcast. We're diving into visual art, focusing on nature preservation. Visual artist Christina Selby joins us to talk about how she uses visual storytelling as a powerful tool to share the beauty of our planet. Christina, welcome to the show. It's awesome having you on. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Of course. So before we dive into this list of questions, just give the audience a brief background of who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so I grew up in Wisconsin in the Midwest, did a lot of outdoor stuff with my dad. He was environmental planner, and so I was sort of raised with this ethic of looking at the world and the natural world with respect and how to treat it well and how we can live, or at least try to live in harmony with nature. And then I went ahead and got my degree in ecology and thought I would go into research science. And I did that for a little while. I studied, like scuba dive in Minnesota lakes in the summer. And, it was really fun to spend that time outdoors, but I just didn't feel like that work was exactly right. And so then I moved into doing environmental education, did that for a number of years. I loved that work. And then I moved out west into the mountains and really felt like I love the mountain meadows and the wildflower fields and the fireflies. I remember a lot of that from my childhood in the Midwest. But once I got to the mountains, I felt really that like this is where I want to be and this is my place. So I spent most of my adulthood in the West, besides a stint in the tropics when I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Panama. And so after my husband and I married, we moved here to Santa Fe, New Mexico. I've been here for 20 some years, and maybe not long after I moved here, he bought me my first camera, and I started to learn about science communications. And I felt like that was something that I really wanted to move out of environmental education, explore that idea. And so, took a course that they offered here, some journalists offered here on science communications, started writing for different publications, and then started bringing my photography into that. And it's just kind of grown. And I've moved more. I still do quite a bit of writing, but I really love the visual storytelling and sort of have moved more in that direction as my life continues. So that was a little bit, the thread of like being in nature, being connected to nature follows me my whole life, but I've explored it in many different ways. So.
Right. But let's go through that journey, moving around a lot, finally ending up in the Midwest and then traveling all around the world. Would you say, just growing up, that was just early inspiration for your love of nature and the outdoors?
Yeah, we didn't travel so much when I was younger, but we did a lot of camping, a lot of being outside. My mother's family are farmers. They had a dairy farm, and we would spend our summers there, occasionally get to milk a cow, but we would be on the lakes and be, swimming and fishing and just kayaking and spending a lot of time outdoors. So I think I would say that's the major influence for me. And my other grandma on my dad's side was a singer and a painter and an artist, and she loved flowers. And so I would spend time with her in her rose garden. And so I kind of got it from different angles, sort of very practical, hands-on farming side, and then the more artistic side from my dad's family.
Yeah, it's like both of those worlds kind of combine with you, the agriculture side, the love of nature, and then the arts side, just kind of combining into one. And that leads us right into a lot of the work that you do. I looked at all of your photography work and all of that, but has spanned across many medias, I guess that you could say. And on your site, something that popped out to me, your work explores, quote, who we are in relation to the more than human world. What does that phrase mean to you? What does it mean for your work? And how does your photography help us kind of redefine our role as caretakers in this world?
Yeah, so that phrase, more than human world, I think sort of the first person who brought that was a writer named David Abrams. He's actually based here in Santa Fe, New Mexico as well, or he used to be. I think he's moving around a bit now, but it's sort of to describe our place. There's one view, sort of worldview, that puts humans above everything else. It's our world to do what we want with. It's sort of this domination, consumption mentality. And so the more than human is sort of to put us in place of like being more in the interconnected space. Like we're here on this planet with these other species. This world is not just about humans, and we need to learn how to live well with the plants and the animals and the rest of nature. And so, I think nature photography can bring that awareness generally because we're looking closely, we're paying attention to nature, we're showing things that people might not see in their everyday lives, especially if we're living in urban environments. And there's a lot of photography out there now, a lot of what we're seeing on the screens, but I still believe that an incredibly beautiful or unique or like a set of photos that are telling a story can really stop people in their tracks and have them consider, oh my gosh, I never knew this thing about this flower or about nature in this way, or that place is just so incredibly beautiful and I'm feeling a sense of awe and wonder, and that's opening my heart a little bit to something more than I've experienced before.
And to capture that feeling, out in the natural world, you do use several techniques to do that. I'd like if you could kind of go through some of those, explain what they are and how you choose the right visual tool to tell conservation or preservation story effectively.
Yeah, so when I'm working on a conservation story, I'm looking at presenting different images in different ways. So I'm looking for, who is the hero of this story, whether that's a plant or an animal or a scientist or some other person. And usually I'm looking at making a portraiture of them or photographing them in their environment, and I'm choosing a camera with a different lens for that. But then I'm also wanting to like establish the story in the place. And so that's when I'm using my landscape, or I might use a drone to, if it's something that I might be interested in seeing from above and it has a really graphic nature about it, or it's just such a large place I'm needing to capture that the drone can do a better job than me on the ground with the camera. And then I'm wanting to capture the whole sense of the area. And so that includes all the little things. I'm getting out my macro camera, showing you the details of that place that you might be able to appreciate, at a closer range like that. I'm showing you some of the action that's happening on the ground, animals interacting with plants or animals interacting with each other, or the different way that the seasons are expressing themselves on the landscape. And so I'm really looking at sort of, when I'm telling a story, conservation story, most often showing you the whole life of the species. So I'm using all the different tools and points of view and lenses to be able to do that. Or I'm showing you like I'm wanting to give you a sense of place as I'm experiencing it as I'm out there. And so I'm wanting to, give you a different perspective through different lenses and different tools.
Yeah, absolutely. And whenever you're out there capturing this and trying to tell a story visually, how do you balance maybe, of course, the beauty of nature, but I'm sure there's some not so nice things. How do you balance, telling those two sides of the story, if you ever do come across that?
Yeah, I mean, so that's where conservation photography becomes a niche sort of nature photography. Nature photography, you can show the beauty and the incredible nature all day, but it's the conservation photographers who turn around and show you the forest that is cut down, or the habitat that's destroyed, or something not so pretty going on with the animals. And I try to be careful about what I'm presenting because I want people to know what's going on, and I want, those photos can have an impact, but I'm also trying not to overwhelm people and scare them. So it's definitely a balance between showing the beauty and the inspiration and unlocking that wonder and awe in people, which can have people want to take action, but also knowing, the reality of how humans are interacting sometimes with different species is not so pretty. And we also need to represent that as well, so people can make informed decisions.
Yeah, and I think your emphasis on storytelling and motivating others to act kind of leads into that as well. What, in your experience, is the most powerful element a photograph or a documentary or video can possess to inspire conservation action from other people?
I think it's maybe not one element, but it's a good sort of way that you can bring things together. So, for example, I just saw an incredible short documentary film called Hellbent. And it was funny, it was emotional, it was beautiful, it was poignant, it was weird and wild because they were, it was the character was this giant weird salamander in the South. And so, you really want to sort of show all sides and characters, whether it's animal or people, how they're experiencing that and sort of the depths and the variations of their emotions. And sort of, I think the best stories bring together that whole picture, that it's, yes, there's beauty and there's also difficulty and challenges. And, like humans are complex and our emotions are complex and so is nature. And so the more that we can represent that complexity and not just have it be sort of a one note type of thing, I think the more that engages people in wanting them to act on behalf of nature and be that voice.
Yeah, absolutely. Just from your experience as well, what have you found to be some of the biggest challenges while you're out there working that conservation photojournalists like yourself kind of face today? Any advice or that you can tell people, just a heads up of what are some of those challenges while you're out there working and capturing these things?
Well, I mean, there's like the challenges when you're in the field, sometimes you're encountering weather and conditions, or I worked on a story for Audubon magazine where I was supposed to photograph this ptarmigan that lives at the top of the mountains. And, I spent like 3 days in this one area. I had the GPS points from the scientists. I had done all my research and I found absolutely nothing, right? And so I had to go to my editor and tell her, well, the birds didn't show up. And thankfully, she understands that this is part of the process and chose another place. But I think you really need sort of perseverance and patience to capture these stories, and you need time, and you need not to sit in your tent when you're not finding the bird or the bird blind, and not sitting there telling yourself, oh, I'm the worst photographer ever, this sucks, I'm a failure, like just remind yourself it's part of the process. You keep pursuing it, keep doing your research, keep talking to people. It just takes, nature doesn't always show up, and if we're in a hurry, nature kind of sometimes plays with us, doesn't give us exactly what we need. And so it is a profession that takes people with patience and can be calm and can like stay positive and just keep working at it. And, another challenge is sort of just generally what we're seeing in the world, there's lack of political will to tackle a lot of these issues. And so, it's just the constant, I'm 51. It's not new, but it feels like it's a little more intense right now in terms of being a minority voice. But, it's something I believe in. And I think we just have to remember it's not about us. It's about the things that we're photographing and how much we love them and continuing to give our voice. And, there's lots of challenges I could talk about, but I would just tell people, just if you love it and you're passionate about it, just keep doing it. And
yeah. No, I'm so glad that you brought that up about being patient. Sometimes nature has a funny way of telling us to just kind of slow down for a second, appreciate what you're doing and where you are. I'd love to hear about that process of you see a single image, like one of your pieces, and you have a beautiful picture, but kind of explain, I'm sure, the hours, days, maybe even weeks that actually goes into maybe just one single photograph.
Yeah. So, for example, I do a lot of work with native plant conservation groups. And so I'm photographing plants a lot, and plants are just a passion of mine. I find them eternally interesting. And the new science on plant communication is just absolutely mind-blowing. So I did a project and still work on it once in a while to photograph rare species in the Southwest. And rare species are rare because there's, few of them. Their habitats might be really just small sort of microclimates that they're living in. And so they're quite challenging to find a lot of times. So I went down to southern New Mexico to try to find this single plant. And I had the data from the scientists exactly where they found in there's like sort of 3 square miles that this plant grows in. And it's a 5-hour drive from my house. So I leave my family for 4 days. I'm like, I'm sure I can do this in 4 days, right? Get this one single plant that I need. And So I like reach the site. I have a little lodge that I'm staying in. I drive on the forest roads for many hours, and then I walk around and I'm trying to find this plant. And it's this like morning glory. It's a vine. It grows, it grows on other plants pretty tall.
Sure.
And so I start to find it, but only the vine and not the plant, and like the afternoon goes by. I'm hiking on like pretty steep terrain. I've fallen a few times, got a bunch of scratches, and I'm totally off trail, and then loose rock is falling, and I'm scrambling around with, very heavy camera gear on my back. And I do that for about 2 days, and all I find are the vines and like a couple flowers that had already bloomed and been pollinated in our north, right? So it's like that a lot of times. And then like in the last 30 minutes when I like had to get back because my kid had some school thing, and oh no, I know what it was. My husband broke his leg up in the north at our cabin, and I get a call. He's in the emergency room. My 16-year-old's there with him, like, oh God, I gotta go.
Yeah.
But finally, like taking this phone call, and I just see this like one single bloom on a plant in front of me. I'm like, yes. And it was perfect. Spent like, 90 minutes working at different angles, got the shot, and went back to the emergency room to get my husband.
I'm telling you, nature works in a very funny way. All of that happened for a reason. You spend all these hours looking for it, and then boom.
Like, all right,
like
I guess you put enough effort in.
Yeah, right.
A little one,
really,
one, right?
Yeah, it really made you work for that one, and I'm sure the photo was beautiful, and it was all worth it. I'm glad it worked out. Just that story of hiking those hills, battling the elements. Tell me about plant blindness, because people can, not necessarily have to go through battling those elements. They could look right in their own backyard, but they just might not know it. And is that what you consider plant blindness?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of coined by a couple scientists. There was a study done a while ago. I'm not trying to get this exactly right, but like at about 3 or 4 years of age, a child can recognize 20 corporate logos, right? Mm-hmm. Like they know the McDonald's sign, they know whatever, Chuck E. Cheese or whatever, but they can't recognize an aspen tree from juniper tree. Like they wouldn't be able to tell you that. And so when people look out at plants, often they're just seeing a green wall, or maybe some, maybe they like wildfires and they see some color, but they couldn't tell you what they are, anything about them. And that is a problem in terms of conservation, because plants, they don't have the same conservation measures or recognition as endangered species in order to be able to protect them and keep rare species, but also like larger habitats. Plants are just a foundation of a habitat. There's always other pollinators and animals that meet those plants in the habitat. And so I think that was why that term came along, because there's just such a difference. It's hard enough to get an animal listed on the endangered species and get the right protection so that those things can survive and continue and have the support they need from us. But it's even more challenging to get plants recognized for some type of conservation status in order to keep around and healthy.
Right. And of course, the reason I bring this up, I should have prefaced this, your Sacred Seeds project kind of highlights the plant blindness and rare and endangered plants that you've documented. How can people look at that project, and how can they see the value in the flora in their own backyards, or the endangered plants or rare plants that they may see?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing in general that people are experiencing is just to sort of disconnect from all of the even services, we could say, that nature provides for us. So we're breathing oxygen today because of plants, right? And most of our clothes are from plant material, and so are our homes. And so just that basic recognition of what plants allow us and how they allow us to live on this planet is important. And so just walking out your back door, and one thing that I've always loved to do, and my husband didn't really understand it at first, was just to learn some of the names of plants in my area. Because that just, like you don't go around saying, hey, you to everybody. If you want to get to somebody, you learn their name, right? And so that's sort of a basic first introduction. Just say hello, and oh my gosh, it doesn't even have to be the regular name or the scientific name. Give it your own name, something that about it that interests you, but at least like establish that basic relationship. And so I'll do that with plants and I'll do that with birds, and, just getting to know what you see every day, just to be able to look out and separate the green of a aspen from the green of a conifer tree, just start with those basic distinctions and build that appreciation, and hopefully we can, sort of come back to a place where we're recognizing the importance of these things in our lives.
Yeah, I think that's such an excellent way to put it, because I think oftentimes people do walk outside and forget that these flowers or the greenery or birds in the sky are living things. And the way you put it, saying you don't go around saying, "Hey, you," to everybody. I just really enjoyed how you put that and how you put that in perspective. Is that something that people can kind of get from your work as well in that visual storytelling?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm really trying when I'm photographing plants, per se, or bird. I do a lot of birds as well, and a lot of landscapes. I'm trying to capture the essence of a place, and so I love to photograph plants in their habitat, sort of with a wide lens that's showing you both at the same time. But I get up really close so you can see the details and the form and what makes that plant unique, and then you can see where it lives and what its place is like, and maybe get a sense of why it's there, and you can maybe then remember that, oh, that's a clover's cactus, and it only lives in this 100-mile strip in northwestern New Mexico in these crazy desolate badlands, but it somehow thrives in that area. And so often choosing plants that have a great story to tell, so that captures people's interest, and I feel like a lot of times I'm just opening the door for people to pay attention and to remember, like we talked about in the beginning, oh, we're part of a more than human world. There's more here that I might not be paying attention to, and maybe it's interesting all of a sudden, or at least beautiful, and that opens some window in my heart.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And that kind of shifts to another project. I came across the Southern Rockies project. I'd love if you kind of explain the background of that and what the, I guess, purpose, if you lack of a better term, of that project, and what you kind of wanted to do covering that in the Rockies, covering what you were seeing there.
Yeah. So now living in Santa Fe, New Mexico, we're right at the very tail end of the Rocky Mountain range, which goes all the way up into Canada. Like I said at the beginning, I really have fallen in love with the mountains. I love spending time in the mountains. And those landscapes that are sort of at the top of the mountains and above tree line are some of the most rapidly changing environments on the planet because of climate change. And so I wanted to be able to tell the story of how they're changing, and also how scientists are thinking about that, and what some of the ideas for helping that ecosystem continue to survive and thrive are. And being at the tail end of the Rocky Mountains, I feel like gives us a really good picture, because things are sort of happening here first. We're getting hotter and drier faster than the rest of the range. And so the studies and the knowledge that is being gathered here will serve, the whole range eventually, in terms of what's going on.
And of course, that's just, one example of, climate change's impact on what's going on in our environment. And then, of course, you had stories that you've covered, like the lost monkey species in the Amazon, to rural communities saving sunflower. Throughout all of these stories, was there one or several experiences that you've had that kind of shifted your personal perspective on maybe some environmental hope?
They all have had an impact on me, for sure. But, those two stories you mentioned, the Amazon, I spent 6 weeks on a houseboat with a scientific crew, and also our local guides. And there's about 20 of us, and there's people from Mexico and Colombia. And then we were traveling on, in very remote sections of Brazil on these rivers, and meeting community people, and they would become our tour guides and our teachers for the day in terms of learning about that environment. And when I worked in Santa Rosa, New Mexico on the sunflower story, it was also, I was working with scientists and a crew, and we were sort of coming into a community that wasn't necessarily our own. But just to see in both of those places, yeah, it's super challenging to have a good livelihood in the Amazon and in Santa Rosa, New Mexico. They're both, have their own challenges in terms of thriving economically. But the deep love that I saw for the places that they were living in, the knowledge that they had about those places. Santa Rosans are a lot of ranchers and farmers and land-based people. And in the Amazon, they're, very much still living off of the land. They're hunting animals for their meals. They're growing little plots of manioca, like yucca and things. And so just to see, there's definitely issues in both of those places with how people are treating the land. And there's also still a sort of a love and a desire to do it well. They just, not, those two things aren't necessarily connecting because of the world we live in and the economic pressures. But that gives me hope just to see, no matter sort of where we are economically. And also this is the same in my experience in the Peace Corps, living in places of extreme poverty and seeing how people are faring or not faring. But, that connection that they have to the land still and living life directly from it was something that gave me hope and knowing that is still within us humans and we have the capacity and the knowledge and the will to do that. We just need right circumstances to be able to do it.
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned your time in the Peace Corps, because that kind of leads into everything, all of this combination from all of your projects, your time in the Peace Corps. Of course, you authored a guidebook, Best Wildflower Hikes of New Mexico. All of this combines activism, on the ground activism, environmental education. How does all of that motivate or influence the stories that you choose to pursue now?
Yeah, I think the stories that I choose often have sort of interest for me in terms of the nature that's being represented, so rare and endangered species. But I'm also very attracted to stories that include agricultural communities or communities that are land-based and sort of struggling with conservation issues. I find a lot of wisdom and knowledge can come from those kind of stories and that sort of juxtaposition. If I'm working on a story that I'm going to present in a magazine or a publication or even a documentary film, I'm sort of looking for those things coming together, sort of incredible nature that is threatened somehow and local community that is trying to figure it out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just all sorts of work coming from your end, and that kind of puts you leads into this. I mean, you're an emerging league member of the International League of Conservation Photographers. That's a mouthful. They always choose the shortest titles, don't they?
Right? ILCP. You can just say that.
Yeah, there you go. ILCP. Of course, that's just my lack of knowledge. I could have just said that. Now, can you explain, what this is and what role you see this collective body playing in shaping the future of environmental protection?
Yeah, so we're a group of people like me who are telling visual stories about conservation and culture and basically bringing that voice of nature through our visual storytelling. And there are photographers and there are filmmakers and there are podcasters and, you have to apply and sort of present your work and show that your work has some impact and some outcomes for conservation. That's really where the road hits the rubber. But I think we're at 100. We just had a new people apply every year. So I think we're at 130 members at this point, people from all over the world. And we just had a gathering in Washington, D.C., where people were presenting their projects, presentations, and showing their films. And we were meeting with editors of magazines who publish stories that we're working on. And so it's a really great community. I really love it. And I think the organization started from Christina Mittermeier, who is pretty well-known conservation photographer. And, it's since grown into this 130 membership. And there's a lot of changes going on in the organization right now, but I think we're going to see a lot more sort of collaborative work between the different members to be able to tell stories like this on a larger scale and working in different and more unique publishing avenues. But I think there's a lot of power in us coming together to work on a certain issue or a certain campaign and really putting these things in the forefront of people's minds. And I think, the times are calling for it even more right now. And I think we're going to see a lot of good work and good collaboration coming forward. And I think that the power of that group is, there's a lot of photography and video coming at us from our screens, but this is a really focused way, and we're really learning how to tell an impact and sort of rise above the din of all the other photography, and they're just people that are super passionate and care about all kinds of little stories, like giant salamanders and the vultures that are in the dumps of India, and just incredibly passionate, wonderful people who are just wanting to bring that voice of nature to the forefront.
Yeah, it's important to have that passion, especially for what you do and what your group does. So that is special to hear that. And before we go here, I just want to know, talking about the future, what conservation stories or parts of the world are you excited to explore next, or which ones are you going to explore next?
Yeah, so I love my Southwest. I think I'm definitely working on more stories here. I'm working right now to bring a bunch of different stories together under this idea of climate refuge, which is an idea that gives me a lot of hope. So places that have certain qualities that, have maybe withstood climate shifts like ice ages in the past, that can serve to, that will likely survive the current human-driven climate shift that we're going through. And that gives me hope, just because we can prioritize those places, and they're sort of these little chips of biodiversity, seeds of the future that can spread when conditions improve in the future. So I'm working on that kind of story. And then I'm also really interested, along with the sort of Rocky Mountain work that I've been doing, on how the innovations coming around about how forests recover from mega wildfires. We have a lot of those in the Southwest these days. Right. And there are some really interesting innovations going on. And so I'm actually going to South Korea in June to look at, they have, they just sort of been recognized for their really forward-thinking wildfire recovery initiatives that have prioritized biodiversity over sort of commercial species of trees. And so I'm going to take a look at that and see what we can learn from that and bring back to the U.S. and to that story. And so it's richer. So I'm looking forward to getting to know the Southeast Asia.
Yeah, no, that's exciting. And I'm sure, I hope a lot of people will look forward to that. And I wish we could get to every project that you've worked on and future projects that you're going to be working on. So this is your platform right now. If you want to tell people where to find all of the projects that you've worked on, all of your photos, your videos, all that stuff, the floor is yours.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, you can go to my website, ChristinaMSelby.com. And I've got all my portfolios for my different projects, and I've got all my, links to magazine articles and links to movies and documentaries that I've been involved with on there. And that's kind of a hub where you can find everything about me if you're interested.
Perfect. We love a all-in-one site you just go to. Makes it very simple for everybody. Christina, I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks. It was a fun conversation. Appreciate it.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we're looking forward to, keeping an eye out what you're doing in the future as well.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for listening. That's all the time we have today. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Four Worlds Podcast. Until next time, you can catch up on the latest innovations shaping our world at tomorrowsworldtoday.com. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel.